It all started as usual. Mommy noticed that the basement light was flickering. Daddy Pig went to check, and Peppa and George wanted to go with him. Daddy smiled, but he looked strange. The basement seemed very uninviting. Stone walls, a gray staircase, and a single dim bulb swinging overhead. When they descended, the door behind them closed on its own with a loud click. The light flickered. George looked back and disappeared without a sound, without a trace. Peppa ran to find him. Suddenly, doors appeared on the walls, low wooden doors like those in old cabinets. She opened one. Inside was George's old plush dinosaur, stained and dusty. It didn't move, but its eyes blinked. Suddenly, a projector light appeared on the wall. It turned on by itself. The film started playing frames, old recordings, as if from surveillance cameras. Peppa saw herself, but she was in a different basement, standing and looking into the camera, faceless. In one of the frames, there was George. He was shouting, but no sound came out. The camera jerked, and the image cut out. The floor near Peppa began to crack. Black liquid poured from the cracks. It moved toward her, as if alive. Peppa screamed, and suddenly, silence. The next morning, Peppa sat alone in the kitchen. Behind her was the basement, its door slowly opening. Something supernatural was moving toward her, getting closer with each step.
It was the most ordinary evening in Peppa Pig's family home. Daddy Pig was reading his newspaper in his favorite armchair. Mummy Pig was knitting on the sofa, and Peppa and George were playing on the soft carpet in front of the fireplace. The house was warm and cozy. Lamps softly illuminated the room with golden light. No one suspected that this peaceful evening would be the beginning of an incredible adventure. Suddenly, Peppa noticed something strange. One of the lamps began to flicker. "Daddy, look at the lamp," said Peppa. "It's behaving very strangely." Daddy Pig approached to check the lamp, but at that very moment it went out completely. The room became a bit darker. "Strange," muttered Daddy Pig. But this was only the beginning. One by one, lamps throughout the house began to go out. First in the hallway, then in the kitchen. The family watched with concern as their cozy home plunged into twilight. Electricity seemed to disappear room by room. "What's happening to our house?" asked Mummy Pig. Mummy Pig, always practical, got out candles and flashlights. The family gathered around the kitchen table, lit by the flickering light of candles. Their faces were illuminated by uneven dancing light. The atmosphere became completely different, more mysterious and anxious. "Good thing we have supplies," said Daddy Pig, turning on a flashlight. Peppa approached the window with a flashlight. What she saw made her heart beat faster. Outside the window was not just the darkness of night. There was absolute, unnatural black emptiness. Even the flashlight beam disappeared into this darkness. "Mommy, Daddy, come here," called Peppa in a trembling voice. "Look what's outside." The family realized this was not an ordinary power outage. Daddy Pig decided to find out what was happening outside. He took the most powerful flashlight and headed to the front door. Slowly opening the door, he saw nothing. Literally nothing. Where there should have been a porch and garden, there was only black emptiness. "We can't go out," he said, closing the door. "There's nothing outside." Returning to the living room, the family discovered another strangeness. Furniture began to disappear. First, the coffee table simply dissolved into the darkness. "Where's our table?" asked Peppa. Then books began disappearing from the shelf, one by one. The darkness wasn't just surrounding their house, it was penetrating inside and consuming their world. Peppa, always brave and curious, suggested finding the cause of what was happening. "Maybe something in the house is causing this darkness," she said. "We should find it." With a flashlight in hand, she went down to the basement. The old steps creaked under her feet. In the corner of the basement, she noticed something strange, a dark, shiny object that absorbed the flashlight's light. The family gathered around the mysterious black crystal. It seemed to suck light from the surrounding space. "Where did this come from?" asked Mummy Pig. "I've never seen anything like this." But then they noticed that George's dinosaur began to glow faintly, as if trying to resist the dark force. "Look at George's dinosaur," whispered Mummy Pig. "It's glowing." Daddy Pig tried to approach the crystal, but the closer he got, the weaker the flashlight became. "I can't get close to it," he said. "It's too strong." The family joined hands and slowly approached the crystal. George's dinosaur glowed brighter when they were together, but suddenly the flashlights began going out one by one. The family was left in almost complete darkness. In complete darkness, the family instinctively drew even closer together. George hugged his glowing dinosaur tightly, while the others joined hands. And then a miracle happened. Their love for each other began to create its own light. Warm, living radiance emanated from their hearts. "We're together," whispered Peppa. "And as long as we're together, no darkness can defeat us." "Our family is our strength," added Mummy Pig. An incredible battle began between the light of family love and the dark force of the crystal. Light spread through the house, fighting the darkness. The house trembled from this confrontation. In some rooms, light won. In others, darkness tried to hold its positions. "Don't let go of each other," shouted Daddy Pig. "Our love is stronger than any darkness." Gradually, light began to win. The black crystal cracked, losing its power. With the first rays of dawn, the battle ended. The black crystal crumbled to dust and disappeared. Light returned to the house. First, the natural light of dawn, then all the lamps started working again. The disappeared objects returned to their places. "We did it," said Peppa, hugging everyone. "We defeated the darkness with our love." Outside the windows, familiar landscapes were visible again. Everything returned to normal. The family had breakfast in the brightly lit kitchen. The sun shone through the windows, and everything looked completely ordinary. But there was a new closeness between them, a new understanding of how important they were to each other. "Our family can overcome any difficulties," said Daddy Pig, looking at his family with special tenderness. "We will always take care of each other," promised Peppa. In the evening, the family gathered in the living room again. All light sources worked normally, but Peppa noticed small changes. The shadows had become slightly longer and deeper, not frighteningly, but noticeably. It was a reminder of the adventure they had experienced. George hugged his dinosaur tightly, which still glowed very faintly, their little secret. "I'm just thinking about how important it is to appreciate light when we have it," said Peppa. "And appreciate each other," added Daddy Pig. The family was no longer afraid of darkness. They knew they had light that would never go out, the light of their love for each other. And somewhere deep in the house remained a barely noticeable warm glow, a reminder that love can indeed conquer all.
A bright sunny day, the entire Peppa family was on their way to visit Grandma and Grandpa.
"I can't wait to see Grandma and Grandpa,"
said Peppa.
Dinosaur! Grrr.
Exclaimed George. They enjoyed a cozy time together, baking cookies. Peppa and George exchanged mischievous smiles.
"Let's explore the basement,"
suggested Peppa. They tiptoed down the creaky stairs into the dimly lit basement. In the corner stood a dusty chest covered in cobwebs.
"What is that? A treasure chest?"
Peppa asked in surprise. She opened it with a loud creak. Suddenly, dark shadows burst out from inside, forming sinister figures. "Peppa, I'm scared," George said fearfully. At that moment, everything in the kitchen was peaceful and calm. The family was drinking tea when, suddenly, the children's screams prompted the parents to go downstairs.
"What's going on, kids?"
asked Mummy Pig. The shadows swirled around the parents, trying to pull them into the chest. Daddy Pig grabbed one of the tentacles that was emerging from the chest.
"George, Peppa, back away!"
Daddy Pig shouted sternly. But suddenly, one of the shadows struck him, causing him to lose his balance and loosen his grip. The shadows swallowed the parents. Grandma and Grandpa were having a lovely chat in the kitchen But Grandpa noticed that no one had come back from the basement for a long time and decided to check. Grandpa Pig hurried down the stairs with a serious look on his face.
Inside this chest were the souls of those brave enough to open it. I found this on an old ship,
He said grimly.
It's a curse.
He pulled out an old book from his pocket and began to recite a spell. The shadows taunted Grandpa, whispering incomprehensible words, and he looked frightened.
Grandpa, help us!
Peppa cried out. The shadows started to dissolve, but suddenly George snatched the book from Grandpa's hands and threw it onto the floor. His eyes turned red as if he were under hypnosis. No more light needed, he declared. The remaining shadows lunged at Grandpa, dragging him into the chest. He struggled but was helpless. Peppa watched in horror as George advanced toward her with tears in her eyes.
What are you doing?
She shouted in fear. With tears streaming down her face, she grabbed the tattered book tightly and held it high.
I won't let you take my family!
She declared to the shadows, her voice trembling but resolute. She recited something she remembered from Grandpa's stories. The shadows screamed and began to vanish. Silence fell over the basement. Peppa and George were left alone, trembling with horror as they realized they had lost their family. At that moment, Grandma was enjoying the taste of her tea and listening to pleasant music, but a feeling of unease disturbed her peace. Grandma Pig appeared at the top of the stairs, looking horrified at what was happening. Peppa and George looked at each other, trembling, speechless. From inside the open chest, faint whispers of the shadows still echoed softly. Peppa found a box in the closet, dusty, old. On it was written, "Our home," in childish handwriting. Inside was a tape, a regular VHS, but their family hadn't owned a player in years. Mummy Pig was surprised. Someone must have mixed it up. Let's throw it away? But Daddy Pig said, "I have an old player in the basement. We can watch." That evening, they all gathered in the living room. The screen flickered. The image shook. On the tape, their house, like someone was standing silently, filming. "Strange," said Mummy Pig. "I don't remember anyone recording us." Then, dinner scene. Everyone sitting at the table. Daddy, Mummy, and Peppa on both sides. Two Peppas, identical, both eating. But one of them smiled. Wrong. Suddenly, one of them turned her head and looked directly into the camera. And in the next instant, she was standing in their room. Deleted Peppa Pig episode, The Living Toy. George loved his dinosaur, but that day, the toy fell into a place where it shouldn't have gone. George didn't know. Some toys find their owners on their own. When George disappeared, Peppa decided to look for him, but she had no idea. She would have to search not for her brother, but for what had taken him. The trail led to the nursery, where it all began. The door to the nursery swung open, and Peppa saw a giant dinosaur holding George in its claws.
Give him back!
Peppa shouted, but the dinosaur already knew his name. Peppa tried to rescue her brother, but the dinosaur swatted her away with its tail. George mumbled. His voice sounded strange, as if the dinosaur was learning how to be him. Peppa grabbed a toy hammer and struck the dinosaur's paw. It dropped George.
Run!
Peppa yelled, but George didn't move. His eyes turned red. In the morning, George returned, but Peppa saw that now the dinosaur was always watching him. At night, a voice was heard behind the door.
The little dinosaur. Mine.
He waiting, because children can be lost so easily, especially when they think they've been found. This is a lost episode that was never aired on TV. It all began on a normal day. Peppa lost one of her baby teeth. "Hooray!" she shouted, "Dad. Now the tooth fairy will bring me a gift." Mummy Pig smiled. "Put the tooth under your pillow, dear. There'll be a surprise in the morning. That night, Peppa woke up. The room was dark, but something felt wrong. She heard a crunching sound from under her pillow. When she lifted it, the tooth was gone, but there was no gift either. Only a strange white lump, like it was made of bones. The next day, George complained about a toothache. Then Mummy Pig, then Daddy Pig. They all said, "Maybe we ate something bad." That night, Peppa woke up again, but not from the crunch. This time, from breathing. Someone was sitting by her bed, a figure, gray, far too tall, with long arms and a grin that stretched ear to ear. "Do you brush your teeth well, Peppa?" it whispered. "You give them to me, one by one, every night." Peppa screamed, but no one came. George was asleep with his mouth open. His front teeth were missing. Mummy was standing in the hallway, smiling. On her cheek, a white patch like bone powder. Peppa ran to the mirror. On her face, new teeth were growing, but not hers. A third row, sharp, wrong. She ran back to the bedroom. Everyone's teeth were falling out, more and more every second, and someone stood in the corner. That same figure, but its face. Oh God. The pig family went on vacation to an old house in the middle of the forest. The house creaked with every step, and the trees outside the window didn't move even in the wind. Peppa and George were playing in the nursery. The parents were preparing food in the kitchen. At first, everything was going well, but in the evening, George noticed something outside the window.
He is already here.
He whispered. That night, George saw a silhouette of a strange tree through the window. He went outside to look at it. It was a mistake. In the morning, George was gone. Mom cried. Dad turned pale. The police didn't answer, so the parents went into the forest to look for him. They told Peppa not to go anywhere and not to open the door for anyone. Peppa was left alone. The parents walked along a creepy trail and ended up deep in the forest. Suddenly, they came across what had caused the nighttime sounds. A huge tree with arms and legs. Eyes and a creepy smile stood and looked at them. Meanwhile, Peppa was sitting in the living room. Suddenly, the TV turned on by itself. On screen was their forest. The camera slowly zoomed in on something between the trees. It was her parents hanging upside down. Then static and silence. Suddenly, the lights in the house went out. Fear gripped Peppa, but staying inside was dangerous. The monster knew where she was. Peppa tried to run through the forest to find help, but it had become denser than during the day. She walked along a trail and suddenly saw it. A creature resembling a tree. Tall, thin, yellow eyes, a huge mouth. It was staring directly at her.
Peppa, your family has been waiting.